The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good day, everybody. Thank you for attending the monthly Conexxus webinar series. And today we're going to talk about your systems that are talking to you. And next slide, please. Our agenda today, I'll go over a few housekeeping items, talk about the presenters, a little bit about Conexxus. We'll go through the presentation, and lastly, we'll have Q&A. Just as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. It will be made available in approximately 30 days. You have two places to go find the webinar, and first is on YouTube. You can just search by Conexxus, or you can go to conexxus.org under resources, and there's a whole webinar section there. And it's great because we've had some really, really great webinars and in the past, and we have some great ones coming up in the future as well. If you stay through the webinar and complete just a few short surveys, you'll be provided you'll be sent an email with a survey link. And if you complete the survey link and complete the survey with a few questions, you'll be provided a link to the presentation. All participants are on mute. We do ask that you use the web interface to ask your questions or type your questions. It's in the GoToWebinar panel. Actually, there's a little question section. Please, no specific vendor questions or specific cart brand questions. And if you do have any questions following the webinar, during the webinar, or any suggestions for future webinars, which is also one of our survey questions, please email info@conexxus.org. So today, our Conexxus host is Miss Allie Russell. She is the technology behind it today. I'm your moderator, Cara Gunderson. I happen to chair the Conexxus Data Security Standards Committee. My real job is the point of sale manager at Citgo Petroleum, and I'm a volunteer. And another volunteer with us is George Sconiers. And so today, George is going to share some awesome information with us. He is the Senior Solutions Architect at Omega. And then, of course, he has his voice assistant, Alexa. I know a lot of people are very interested in how to integrate Alexa, so George has got some great information for us today. I want to share a little bit about Conexxus because Conexxus is a small but mighty nonprofit organization. They really drive the standards for the U.S. petroleum industry and also work collaboratively with folks across the pond. And really, it's a benefit for everybody because as they set standards, that helps all of us enable similar loyalty products, interfaces for mobile and data security. They certainly help us provide the vision for emerging technology and emerging trends. And Conexxus, you know, is the technology arm for NACS, and they're comprised of basically volunteers such as George and myself, and they have a very few staff members. So it's really the folks from the industry, as some of the Conexxus staff like to say, the smart kids from the industry are really putting together these data standards, which is really helpful for all of us. As I mentioned, we've had some great webinars in the past, and we have George today. We do not have a webinar in October, simply because so many members are at the NACS event. And so therefore, there's a lot of education that's going on at NACS. And then in November, we'll have Joe Basirio from Security Innovation join us again for building a scalable security engineering team. And then I believe in December, what's not listed yet is we're going to have a webinar on chargebacks and handling chargebacks. If you are attending the NACS show, it is coming up very soon. It's October 7th through the 10th in Las Vegas. And Conexxus puts on the Tech Edge portion of the educational series for NACS. Conexxus also has their own booth, which is 6147 at NACS. And Conexxus really wants to thank the 2018 annual Diamond sponsors, and that's M-Shift, Gilbarco, Stuzo, Sibera, and Diebold Nixdorf. Now we're going to move to George and his great presentation. So George, I know that you're going to be switching back and forth a little bit for audio. So if folks hear like a 5 or 10-second delay, that is what's going on behind the scenes here. So George?
Yes, thank you very much for that great introduction. And I really appreciate the opportunity today to speak to all the great folks at Conexxus. I will be switching the audio here in just a second, and we'll get started. Today, I'd like to take you through an approach to bringing operational intelligence to convenience retail. This approach brings security and, importantly, most other operations data to a common point where it can all be analyzed together and then delivered to your employees using a voice assistant to increase their productivity and awareness. I'd also like to introduce the other speaker today for this webinar. Alexa, open Convenience Assistant.
Convenience Assistant, what can I help you with?
General status.
All convenience monitoring is operational. All systems, networks, and IoT sensors are reporting normal status at this time.
Cancel.
Canceling.
Just a quick side note. Don't worry about everything operational intelligence implies for now. That will become clear as we move through the approach. Oh, and another quick note. With a requirement to interact with Alexa several times during this webinar has been pre-recorded in order to smooth its delivery. So let's explore this approach together. Before diving into operational intelligence, let's just consider the characteristics of good information. Back in business school, and probably in dozens of business seminars presented every year, we're likely to see the same or similar characteristics or features of good information as presented in this slide. But in convenience retail, remote stores, different employee needs, and different employee skill levels present many challenges to delivering what is considered by most people to be good information. Convenience retail involves directly managing or co-managing many different service systems with several third parties. Those third parties operate at different levels of operational maturity and ability to integrate. But of course, it's up to the convenience retailer to bring those services together at stores, and to do so while maintaining a long list of security and compliance requirements. Convenience retail store employees and mobile employees often have limited access to the resources and systems available at headquarters and the good information it can provide. Likewise, headquarter employees are often challenged with getting timely information from 10, 100, or even thousands of remote store locations. Although some folks at headquarters may already be using operational intelligence, have taken some recent coursework, or learned about a tool or two to assist them with the headquarters decisions, operational intelligence must have timely data to work with, and you need to share analysis results with employees who need it. A big problem has been brewing in convenience retail for a while. We have many systems in use to monitor and control networks and devices, applications, digital signs, car washes, DVR cameras, and more. Most of these systems have separate operations consoles provided by the product or service vendors as part of their offering. The vendor consoles vary in complexity. Some have mobile device access, others don't. Many require pretty technical knowledge about the networks and devices that they monitor, like your router naming scheme, IP address mapping, and switching infrastructure. Others require detailed knowledge about their user interface, specialized query languages, text commands, and monitored location names in order to use them. Bottom line is, there are many, and they are often very different. Consequently, most retailers simply align employee console access along the lines of departmental responsibility and into several groups, ignoring the suspicion or even the obvious fact that some groups could benefit from some of the information available in consoles they don't have access to. Departmental alignment of consoles can lead to compounded complications and confusion in convenience retail. For instance, a problem in payments might really be related to intermittent network connectivity, and have nothing to do with the payment processor. Headquarters management may not be able to understand that lower category sales were due to melted ice cream or warm beer that was available from an IoT sensor. A tech might be sent out to diagnose a digital signage controller at a store, when in fact a store router upgrade was in progress at the time. Wasted time, wasted travel, wasted expense. Conversely, there can be big benefits to breaking down console boundaries. Network connectivity or slow connectivity when switched over to a wireless ISP backup may influence a store manager's own working hours that day to handle the resulting issues at a store. Optimal delivery routing from store to store, commonly used by delivery drivers with mobile apps, can be used by IT, district managers, or special project contractors to optimize their trip to a list of stores before leaving or even while in their vehicles using just their voice. IoT sensor data like door cycles, motion detection, glass breakage, and gunshot detection is certainly important to security. But more importantly, marketing can get highly valuable and immediate store analytics from pump transaction to door cycle ratios and aisle motion detection while testing new at-the-pump advertising or in-store advertising. Getting all the users onto all the consoles that they could benefit from is expensive. Many users only need very basic information from a console. Sometimes they can benefit tremendously from just a single piece of information, like is card processing down, or did an employee open the store up on time, or is a specific wash fluid empty. But there's a big learning curve to learning many consoles, especially as new versions are released. And of course, all of the consoles typically require credentials. Personnel rotation in convenience retail is relatively high, and it's just too expensive both in terms of training costs or even just in employee non-productive time required to internally train users on all the consoles they could benefit from. If the console vendor charges per user as they typically do, there's a cost associated with that user license fee also. Regardless, even if additional users are free on a vendor's console, there is a continual cost to administer that credential by someone within your organization. So let's talk about the first piece of solving this console problem. First step in our approach, use a SIEM. A SIEM, or Security Information and Event Management System, is already critical to managing network and device security in convenience retail today. As we learned from past Conexxus webinars, any leading SIEM provides substantial benefits in log collection and analysis, compliance efforts, and more. It often serves as the storage control mechanism for logs apart from the networks and devices that the logs originated from for safekeeping. A SIEM provides a consolidated hub that is necessary for alerting on important network and system security related events and serves as the engine behind dashboards and reporting. But a SIEM can also do so much more when fed a full spectrum of operations data. A SIEM can typically index or ingest many different operations data sources, including application logons, payment and wash counts, tank readings, door and motion data, and pretty much data from any application that can provide logging or data in a number of different ways. IoT sensors can provide door cycle, motion, and temperature readings. Payment transaction counts from processors or even payment transaction counts determined from payment connection data traffic can become part of what a SIEM indexes. Some Wi-Fi monitoring systems can log unique visitors by their smartphone Wi-Fi address and provide that to SIEM. Certainly not every single convenience vendor can share data, but the number that can is rapidly increasing as they move toward cloud architectures. And you should be taking that into consideration when selecting new vendors. Without getting into developer-level topics in this webinar, most SIEMs today have evolved to incorporate numerous inputs that allow for the SIEM to ingest data from third-party vendors using standardized methods. Additionally, convenience vendors have adopted the same standards. A REST API can be used by a SIEM to request data from a vendor's backend server, or can be used by the vendor's server to transfer data periodically to the SIEM. Webhooks are typically used by a vendor to send data to a SIEM in near real time. Of course, just like in network and network security device monitoring, good old-fashioned syslogs or other text logs can be periodically generated by the vendor and indexed into a SIEM. Most leading SIEMs are typically very configurable and provide ways to send data in JSON or XML format. They can secure the connection and transfer data via basic ID password authentication or using pre-established tokens or security keys across encrypted connections. A SIEM with all its various inputs can seem a little confusing at first. And if you're like a lot of people, you can really get annoyed sometimes with high-level descriptions of products and services on the web without any real-life examples of how things are actually done. So let's dive in and see how we'd actually connect our SIEM to a motion sensor vendor to get motion data. Later, when we get into step 2 of our approach, we will revisit that same data and show how to deliver it to all the employees in your organization who need it. So stick around, it'll be worth it. So the web vendors provided us with battery-powered wireless sensors we can literally just stick up around the store in the areas we need to monitor, and a portal to monitor the sensors. So looking in the motion sensor vendor's cloud portal, we can see the traffic at a store. Specifically, we're looking at aisle number 1 in the vendor's web portal. Fine, that's great, but in order to avoid having to give upper management, marketing, advertising, store layout, and other folks training on the IoT vendor portal, and each their own credential, we'll instead send the vendor's data to our SIEM. First, we'll configure our SIEM to accept the motion data from the IoT sensor vendor and obtain a token to share with them. Next, we will configure the motion IoT sensor vendor portal to webhook our SIEM with the data they collect by simply providing them with the URL of our SIEM and the required security token for our SIEM input for that specific vendor. After that, and using just the single connection we just configured, our SIEM is now receiving the motion data in standard JSON format just seconds after it occurs from all our stores with sensors and all the aisles at each store. Drilling down on a motion event in our SIEM, we can see all the field names and values being collected by the vendor for us and parsed completely and automatically from the JSON formatted data. So now that all the data is arriving in our SIEM, a trained and proficient user with SIEM access can run filters and alerts on the data to drive ticketing and notifications to convenience vendors. The proficient SIEM user can also run analysis on the input data and create attractive dashboards to really wow management at headquarter meetings. And that's great, but what about employees who don't have SIEM access? How will they benefit from such a great company resource? Will employees without SIEM access and training look a little bit like the animals with sad eyes on late-night ASPCA commercials? It would really be a shame to diligently collect all of that data and have all that analysis capability in place and not share it with other employees who need it so desperately to do their job. But you can help them. Just watch these next few slides. The second step of our approach involves delivering operational intelligence to the users who need it. So imagine that management back at headquarters needs to know where they are on the issues they've been having that morning at the Arnold store. But the IT guys appear to all be out at lunch. Of course, the IT guys are actually putting out another fire, but that's beside the point. No, management doesn't have time to learn GeekFest consoles. They just want to know what's going on right now while they're driving to the golf course. So after our approach has been implemented using all the steps you see on this slide, the session between the manager on his way to the golf course and the convenience assistant might go like this. Alexa, open Convenience Assistant.
Convenience Assistant, what can I help you with?
What the is going on at Arnold today?
Arnold, store number 66, at 7:01 a.m. POS number 1 went offline. At 7:06 a.m., ticket number 17538 was opened. IT, and POS vendor were notified by email with ticket details. At 7:14 a.m., IT posted comment to ticket, rebooted the POS but still not functioning. At 8:22 a.m., POS vendor posted comment to ticket, I will be on site at Arnold at about 1 p.m. today. 1 minute ago, at 11:36 a.m., I sent a recording of your original request to me, without the bleeps in it, over to HR. What can I help you with?
If you have a voice assistant at home, like 50 million other US adults do, you know that there are a lot of Alexa native skills or Google actions that a voice assistant can help you with. It is also important to understand that for the currently market-leading voice assistant, there are both native skills like Alexa, what is the weather tomorrow?
Tomorrow in Fenton, you'll see mostly sunny weather and can expect a high of 91 degrees and a low of 67 degrees.
And third-party Alexa skills like the ones we've been listening to today. Today, in the interest of time, we'll be focusing on Alexa. When using Alexa internally for your organization, the third-party skill you create will only be accessible to users that have been approved to use it by PIN number, by the physical voice assistant unit ID, or by their unique voice attributes on any combination of the three. This is true in the office, at home, at the store, or in your car. The third-party skills are developed using the Alexa Skills Kit. The logic behind them runs either on Amazon Web Services Lambda service or on another server providing a compatible web service. And importantly, the SIEM we discussed previously should be one of those services. I realize that there might be some that are not one of the 50 million US adults who already have a voice assistant at home and who have not seen an Amazon Alexa device. For those, here are some images of some of the various units that have been released by Amazon. Just in case you are wondering, we will touch on those with screens and their capability in a couple of minutes. But first, if you believe you might have a desire to verbally or even physically abuse Alexa like the manager on his way to the golf game, or if you really just don't like the way it looks and would rather have it appear to be some type of object from an acid trip in the 60s, you can always change the looks with this protective leather mushroom fantasy case, available today from one of our prominent big box retailers. Seriously though, let's go through what happens behind the scenes with Alexa. Alexa is awoken with a wake word like Alexa, and only at that point begins to digitize a user's speech and streams that speech data to the Alexa service at Amazon. Based on the spoken invocation like Alexa, Open Convenience Store Assistant, an approved custom third-party skill is opened and an interaction model for that skill is loaded. An interaction model for that skill begins to match the user's speech utterances, the user's spoken requests, with intents or commands and slots, the variables, defined in the interaction model that the user is interested in. For example, a slot could be a store name or store number. This speech-to-text and command slot interpretation process is AI-based, can be trained through samples, and is continually improved and is what makes Alexa much more human-like. A Lambda, or primary web service, processes those intents and slots. It makes decisions about what other third-party services can be utilized to satisfy the user's request, and sends an API request to one or more of them, gathering the required information. The third-party web services primarily include your SIEM, and hopefully you can clearly see the advantages of collecting all security and operations information into it and leveraging the analysis capabilities present in the SIEM as the first step of this approach. Finally, the primary custom Lambda or primary web service formats up responses to go back to the user as text, which is converted into speech by the Alexa service, or as cards to be displayed on the Alexa Show or Spot devices. A quick note, the displays on the Alexa Show and Spot have significant restrictions on the formatting of displayed data content as of the date of this webinar. The whole process of defining how Alexa understands what the user is saying may seem a little complex at first, but tools are provided so that you can train Alexa to recognize different user requests and map out the intents and slots associated with them. Here you can see a lot of different ways a user could ask Alexa what the open issues are. Let's try one of those out. Alexa, open Convenience Assistant.
Convenience Assistant, what can I help you with?
What's up?
Retrieving all open issues. Afton, store number 11, low transaction volume, 5 register and 1 pump transactions in the last 3 hours. At 6:21 a.m. credit processing went down. Chesterfield, store number 22, at 8:47 a.m. internet connection went down. The store is operating on wireless backup. Arnold, store number 66, at 7:01 a.m. POS number 1 went offline.
Users will likely want information about specific store numbers, store deliveries, hours worked, fuel pumped, transactions processed, and other items. For instance, here is a request that will be using a store number. Alexa can interpret numbers like a store number wherever you tell it that it may appear in a request. Also, by indicating that the slot should be a number improves its recognizing process. Let's try the sample for the intent in this slide. Alexa, open Convenience Assistant.
Convenience Assistant, what can I help you with?
What's happening at store number 33?
Store number 33 Wildwood, at 9:03 a.m. POS number 2 went offline. Ticket number 17648 was opened and store manager and POS vendor were notified via email. At 9:11 a.m. POS vendor remoted in.
Now let's go back to the motion data that we received from the IoT motion sensor vendor into our SIEM earlier in this talk, and review how retaining store traffic and running an analysis using our SIEM, along with delivery by Alexa, can provide important operational intelligence to a marketing employee. We'll also ask about store 33 again, but this time we'll be looking specifically for store traffic, which includes front door open-close cycles from the same vendor and multiple motion sensors in the store. Our SIEM will also run an analysis of recent data since the store opened against a previous time period in days. Alexa, open Convenience Assistant.
Convenience Assistant, what can I help you with?
Tell me about the store traffic at store number 33 since it opened.
Wildwood, store number 33, store traffic from opening. Front door open 212 times. Bakery aisle number 1 motion count 124. Beer cooler aisle number 2 motion count 72. All counts appear normal.
Machine learning can be applied by our SIEM to the data inputs we have connected to it in order to predict future values of those inputs. Once enough samples have been seen, and our SIEM builds a model based on those samples, new inputs can be compared against predicted ones, and if outside a threshold envelope, are identified as outliers. In this example, store system login attempts are being compared against predicted attempts, and outliers are shown as the gold points. With a voice assistant, predefined analysis can be run by your district manager or store manager, and that analysis of the login outliers compared with store Wi-Fi device inventory can provide some very interesting results. Let's show how this can be delivered to store management. Alexa, ask Convenience Assistant about suspicious activity at store 22.
Chesterfield, store number 22. Suspicious activity. Wi-Fi device with name Rusty's iPhone has been observed by the store Wi-Fi device scanner at the same time excessive login attempts have been occurring. This has occurred 5 times over the last 3 days.
Sounds like it may be time to have a conversation with Rusty. In closing, and in summary of the approach that we've described in this webinar, use a SIEM and collect both your security and your operations data into it, and use the data indexed to develop operational intelligence for those who need it. Use a voice assistant like Alexa to share the operational intelligence. If this approach proves to be a bit much for your staff, or if they don't have the time available, seek out a managed security service provider with both SIEM and voice assistant experience to provide the best operational intelligence experience for your organization. Thank you for allowing me to share this with you today.
George, great information. Thank you so much for that. And great idea to actually record that so that I know when we were going through the technical run through a couple days ago, it was a little tough to switch back and forth. So we appreciate that. And we want to remind the audience to please type your questions in the GoToWebinar question panel.
And I'm here to answer any that you'd like.
That's terrific. We currently don't have any questions at all. George, is there anything else that you'd like to follow up with as far as, I know we had your group in at a webinar a few months ago talking about not only SIEM, but also some more managed detection reporting types of logging. And it sounds like what you showed us today, you can wrap all that together.
Yes, anything that can be monitored with a convenience vendor that can provide either logs or API webhooks can be consolidated into that SIEM. And then that SIEM then can be queried by the voice assistant, as we showed in the examples in the webinar, to present that data to all your users, no matter where they're located, at the store, at home, or whatever, possibly even third parties, and could even include other efforts that you might have around marketing or sales, with telling about store specials to potential consumers, or location of your store, and so forth. That all can be done using that same type of an approach.
Is there a possibility for what you talked about today to, and I'm sorry for not being articulate, but to decipher the commands for Alexa between somebody in financial, somebody in back office, somebody in operations? Because obviously the operations person isn't going to want to know that maybe that the POS, I mean, that the POS is on cell backup, but we certainly want to know that is something that the IT person wants to know.
Yes, the assistant is totally aware of who's asking the request. In other words, if you used a PIN number, and I didn't really show an example of that, but if a PIN number is used to, for instance, to connect in, if it's financial information example, or maybe security-oriented operations information, that PIN number can be used then to filter the data, just like we'd filter it for the time of day or week or whatever. So that is certainly something that can be done. You tell a consumer, obviously, if you're using it to market your store locations and your specials, obviously totally different information than you would tell your CEO what the open issues are and which stores are potentially having a problem. There'd be different information. And so we'd certainly do the queries based on the user's identity.
Okay, great. I know you showed it real briefly, but could you go into a little bit more detail about like SIEM? A lot of us talk about SIEM because it's part of our everyday lives, but others on the call may not know exactly what that stands for. So could you talk about the acronym and some of the basic things that somebody would have in their SIEM logging?
Sure. So SIEM stands for Security, Information, and Event Management. And of course, was brought up and first originated around security. And that's why the acronym is what it is. And it had to do with just collecting things that we already had some automation around. For instance, collecting logs from routers and firewall devices, and noting intrusions against the firewall, perhaps noting missing antivirus, things of that nature, all security-related items. And I think what a key thing that's coming to light, not only even outside the convenience area, is that SIEMs can collect much more. They can collect a lot of operational data about the store, user behavior. A lot of very detailed information can be collected with that same server, the same server in the cloud, same server at your headquarters, and then utilized to do much more. And that's what I think. SIEM doesn't serve the acronym SIEM doesn't serve it very well anymore. It's really SIEM and operational information and event management. And that's really where the industry is headed with those devices. Gartner's created some new acronyms around SIEM and the different things it does and so forth. And you can of course read about those, on their sites. But it all boils down to being able to do much more with the same tools you've already invested in.
Sure, sure. And since the Conexxus webinars are sponsored by the Data Security Committee, we also want to note that, of course, logging and monitoring of your network systems is a PCI compliance requirement for all merchants and service providers. So that is just a part of everyday life.
True, and of course, if you're a public company, you also have SOX requirements and other requirements that go beyond PCI that can involve similar requirements, but maybe somewhat different or larger in scope, because of the public nature of the company.
Sure, sure. We do have another question. Are there any implementations currently in place? And do you see anybody leading the industry that is contemplating utilizing something like this?
As far as the voice assistant side, I know that there's been a couple convenience vendors. I won't say their name, but there has been a couple convenience vendors that have implemented it primarily for marketing purposes, meaning using a voice assistant to help bring customers to stores. And just like a lot of retail has, right? You've got pizza places and movies and everything being presented through the voice assistant to consumers in their home. I have not yet heard of extending out information operationally with a voice assistant, and I think this is probably this approach here that we talked about, steps 1 and then steps 2 with the voice assistant, is probably a new concept for this industry and probably many.
Sure. So we do have a few more questions. So obviously you've provided a lot of cybersecurity interface issues that need watching. Can you talk about the security assurance reviews, especially focusing on the vulnerability management and the pen testing activities?
Sure. So, and that's one thing that I know that we've been having a lot of conversations around with here at Mega, is that, when you find vulnerabilities in your organization, those vulnerabilities do cross responsibility boundaries within the organization to take care of. A vulnerability for missing patches or antivirus signatures not up to date, we pretty much know we're going to be going to IT for that type of thing.
Sure.
But there's other types of vulnerabilities sometimes that are detected that may be just operational in scope or have to do with user behavior. In those cases, then sometimes, as we saw with the Rusty's iPhone noted in multiple login attempts, those are a vulnerability that those are an action, of course, that's a user issue that needs to be addressed by a manager or someone in management. But some vulnerabilities may be more simply ones that could be exploited by that behavior, and consequently maybe need to be known to management in addition to just the IT guys who do the grunt work down at the bottom end with their configuration management system or patching system or other RMM. So we see, it spans. You've got the requirement from a vulnerability standpoint to monitor what could show up in an RMM, or even very basic vulnerabilities that a management would need to address.
That's true. That's true. And even if you're not protecting payment card data, we've seen it even in our own industry of smaller companies with, let's say, 50 stores that are multi-branded, where the attackers are simply looking for money to fund the other attacking efforts. So they're going in and placing malware just even in the corporation where there's no payment card data, only to encrypt the files, asking for Bitcoin.
Sure. Or
so that's not only store related, but it's corporation related, especially if you're using a network because you're multi-branded, or even if you're completely unbranded, whatever.
Sure. And a resource like all those machines you would have in a convenience organization, once they learn how to attack one, they may be able to attack all of them because of similar architecture and layout and so forth.
True.
And the bots could utilize those to launch denial of service attacks against a company
Mhm.
and so
Right.
forth. So sometimes what you're monitoring for is things like just the machine being a lot more busy than it normally is, you know? And that may lead you then to find a vulnerability that you didn't know existed because of the, you know, essentially the empirical testing of that machine and how it's operating.
That's true. That's true. You bring up another good point about the folks that the attackers are looking, if they're mining Bitcoin, they're actually looking to steal electricity and computing power.
Yep, compute power is key to launching denial of service attacks.
Yep, exactly. So we do have a few more questions here since we have a little extra time. Are all users locked into using Splunk
No,
for
no,
SIEM
no.
and
That
for
was
Alexa?
no. I definitely don't want to, you know, to make that, you know, as a statement here. That since we're highly familiar with Splunk, it was easy to get screenshots.
Okay.
But there's a number of good SIMs on the market today. And Splunk is just one of those. I believe it is probably one of the leaders. If you take a look at, you know, again, Gartner's quadrant, you know, the standard quadrant graphs, you'll see that Splunk and a few others are at the very top right in the top quadrant. So there's others
Mm-hmm.
out there, and of course
Sure.
you can spend the time and build your voice assistant interface to a different SIM. It just depends on, you know, your staff's capabilities and the development time you have available.
Sure. Sure. So the next question is actually quite great since we're Conexxus is sponsoring and footing the bill for the webinar here. The question is, isn't it a pain to get every device from every sort of feed into a SIM? How did developing IoT or Internet of Things standards play into this?
Well, I showed you the one example in the webinar where we were able to just with some very quick changes to the SIM and changes to the vendor's portal, since again most vendors are moving to cloud portal architectures. What happens is in the case of motion sensors, as an example, or door sensors, all that transactional data gets rolled up to their cloud, and then the single cloud interface is used to go to the SIM in order to collect it all. So with that one connection we made, we could literally be collecting data in near real time from thousands or even tens of thousands of sensors with that one interface. So it's
Yeah.
important to see that, you know, you do need, and that's why I made the statement on the slide, that you need to consider vendors who are going towards an architecture and have the APIs and the sharing capability either through syslogs or through webhooks or whatever standardized sharing method they use so that you can get that data. And again, selecting a SIM that has the necessary inputs and the variability of that inputs helps you then integrate that process. The SIM is a very intelligent piece of software today. You'll see it in, again, the leading SIMs so that they can parse the data automatically in JSON or XML format, so you don't have to do a lot of grunt work to start getting usable data and to be able to report on that.
Yeah. And then also don't be afraid to vet and your third-party providers. I mean, we've seen so many huge and well-known data breaches because they weren't able to get to the corporate office, but they were able to get to the third parties and sort of snake their way through the network to get to the payment card data or the sensitive data if you have loyalty data. So just kind of keep that all in mind as you're building that out, and make sure that you're working in tandem with your security provider.
Yes, and it's important that data feed that you get from the third parties, you know, whether it's WARSH usage data or you know, it's management data from a WARSH system or pump transaction counts, you know, you're going to want to be sure that you run the appropriate filters and the appropriate checks on the data that's coming in to be sure you're not seeing any evidence of something you shouldn't have in your organization at that point. Or likewise, if you're sending data out to them for some reason, configuration-wise or something, you're going to want to scan that data, you know, periodically or each time it's generated to be sure that there's no, you know, no PII or cardholder data or anything like that in there.
Yeah, I mean, Donna Perkins, I believe it was last December, was our webinar presenter, and she actually talked about even file imports and databases in your systems containing the file imports are certainly in scope for your PCI compliance. So, so just be cognizant of all of those extra ancillary things that you may be creating to make this all work.
Yes.
So, couple more questions here is, you know, for small operators, how much time do they need to dedicate having it all programmed properly? I mean, are there third parties? Are there devices companies that they can work with?
Yeah, there are some MSSPs that, of course, utilize a SIM as part of their offering today.
And
our company, of course, is one of those, and
yep.
they basically will use a SIM in order to consolidate the data and can work with you to gather the data from the various different vendors. They're knowledgeable of the interfaces that some of those vendors have and so forth. The assistant, which is again a key part of this, of what we talked about in this two-step process to deliver to the people who need it without having, SIM knowledge, okay, is a relatively new thing. And I'm sure that it will become more commonplace, but right now it's a brand new concept. And it's probably the first, I think, valid attempt to try to get it to people other than like a mobile app where you've got to sit there and update that mobile app continuously in the user's phones, and then some people don't update them and so forth. This is goes back to the centralized approach where, the data that you're providing in the speech that it's generating and what you're hearing is all managed centrally so that the user really doesn't have to do anything. They just essentially, either obtain an Alexa or an Amazon device at home or at the store or at the conference room at the office, or they use their mobile phone to connect to essentially the Alexa service in this case, and everything in that application is coming from a centralized location.
Great. Are you going to be at the next show, George?
Absolutely.
Awesome. And we're getting some great accolades from the audience, especially from some of our audience members who I consider one of the tougher security experts in the field. So they say kudos to you and great creativity on how to integrate the smart technology.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, and yes, I'll be there if you want to talk about this. You might want to run through the cool new products showroom. You may see some things interesting there too. So we'll be there.
Great. Just one last question. Can you query the number of specific Alexa voice requests by user?
Yes, there is analytics that you can get on the back end in the development console area for Alexa. When you develop your third-party skill, that'll show you how many users use which intents, how long they were in there, and other very good metrics so you can begin to see what the utilization looks like across the board.
Great. Well, if there are no further questions, I guess we will conclude the webinar. George, thanks again. This was really great information. And probably within the next hour or so, you will receive an email with a link to the survey. And if you complete the survey, you will get a link to this presentation. So again, thanks, Allie, and thanks, George, for all of your great presentation material today. Everybody have a great day, and see you at NAC.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Bye.